Hello and welcome to the AVLAND video guides to the Onkyo TX-NR809 home cinema receiver. We're going to talk you through the features of this receiver and the best way to set it up. The TX-NR809 is the new THX Select 2 Plus certified 3D compatible AV receiver from Onkyo. It's rated at 180 watts per channel and has 8 HDMI inputs along with dual HDMI outputs. It has support for audio return channel on the main HDMI out and 7 channels of amplification. Got a very high build quality, and you can see uses the new Onkyo styling of very clean lines from the reference hi-fi range. Has the decoding for Dolby Pro Logic 2Z and Odyssey DSX for the inclusion of spatial front speakers, and dual USB inputs with support for Ipod Digital, mass media storage, or compatibility with the UWF1 wireless networking dongle. It's got an aluminium front panel and the front flap, so you get that lovely clean design with minimalist visible controls on the front, just input selection, standby and the volume control. It's also, you see the Spotify logo there, compatible with Spotify Premium, so you can access all of your Spotify Premium playlists, and it's also compatible with Napster, Last.fm and Onkyo's Vtune technology. It's got video upscaling to 4K via the Marvel Studio video processor, along with additional processing from the HQV video processing chip and ISF video settings too. Under the front panel are the front USB, you can see there next to the HDMI, along with the auxiliary audio and video analog inputs and the optical input. It's also got a setup mic input and a headphone out, and then you've got the menu buttons and the main power on-off button, not the standby button. Moving on to the rear panel, you can see it's very well packed out. It's got 7 rear HDMI inputs which are assignable, which you could use for a Blu-ray player, Sky HD or Freeview HD, and games consoles. You've got dual HDMI outputs for connection to, for example, a television and a projector. It also has a rear USB port, which you can see there, next to the Ethernet. And if you're not using Ethernet, where your 809 is, then you can also buy the UWF1 wireless USB adapter. There's a universal port as well, so on top of all of the other features of this unit, there's also a DAB module and iPod dock available, which are daisy chainable. There's an RS-232 port below that, and a dedicated analog phono input, along with a host of analog audio-video ins, with multi-channel analog input there. And you can also got pre-outs for connections to additional power amplifiers, which provides you with an upgrade path if you wanted to improve the sound quality. It's got colour-coded banana plug terminals, and it's also provided with stickers, which corresponding stickers for your speaker cabling, with 3.5mm IR in and out, and zone 2 and 3 trigger outs. It's also a Zone 2 and 3 RCA line outputs for connections to power amps in separate zones, though you can assign the 6th and 7th channels for a powered Zone 2 out. You can also see here, if you want to use banana plugs with your amp, you just need to take out the small black plastic bungs from the back with a small screw. Okay, now we're going to take you under the lid of the Onkyo TX-NR809. Moving inside the 809, you can see the first thing that grabs your attention is that very large heatsink in the middle of the amplifier. You've also got the HDMI video board, and that silver box underneath it is the tuner. The large power supply at the front, and just at the bottom here there's the VGA inputs for your PC, though a lot of PCs are now coming with HDMI. So there's 7 HDMI inputs on the rear and 2 out, and there's also a link to the front auxiliary HDMI. Remember, this has got video upscaling to 4K with the Marvel Studio processing. You can see we're just looking at now the 7 amplifier boards in the middle with copper bus bars, which is really quite impressive on this level of AV receiver, with the 2 main large capacitors in between the amplifier boards. There are 2 fans at the bottom, at the front of this unit, with plastic over the top of the one that was at the bottom of the screen then. What we think this is, well, this hasn't been specified, is that the one that was at the bottom is actually an exhaust fan with an intake fan on the other side. The front electronics for this as well, the display electronics are actually shielded, which helps to reduce the unwanted noise getting to the audio components. You can see we have just having a closer look at the amplifier boards there, and you can also see on the HDMI the HQV VIDA chip on board. The HQV processing is really impressive. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the menus of the 809. So you see here the first menu is Monitor Out. This is where you'll set your resolution and how the dual HDMI outputs are configured. With the resolution here, so obviously you can go from 480 to 720 to 1080i to 1080p, or force it to do 24, and there's that 4K upscaling. If you leave it on through, for example, it will just pass through the HDMI signal without actually trying to scale it, which for the most part you may not need to use video scaling. The HDMI assign menu. So if you, for example, want to assign, let's say, BD DVD, so that's HDMI 1 on the back of your Onkyo. It's just literally, I mean, it defaults to 1, but if you wanted to put it on a different one, you just scroll across with the cursor keys on your remote control or underneath the front flap. You cannot actually assign the auxiliary HDMI, which is the front HDMI. But with the other inputs here, you can see with the coaxial and digital audio input, you can also assign those. You can assign more than one video input to, for example, BD DVD. What the 809 actually does is it defaults to using the best inputs, which would be HDMI in this case, if it detects that components and HDMI are both selected for BD DVD. Moving on to the speaker setup, first thing is the settings. This is where you set your speaker impedance and then whether you're biamping, so how you're going to be using the additional 6th and 7th amplifiers. You also get a small demonstration of the terminals you'd use on the back of your unit. On the speaker configuration menu, so you can adjust the crossover per speaker, so you set at which point the signal is sent to the subwoofer, and how many speakers you're actually using. So this is where you set yourself up to say that you're using 7.1 or 5.1, and you can also show whether you're going to be using the front high speakers or wide. So this is where you set these sort of speaker things up. Just mentioned just a little bit before about biamping. We would actually recommend that you biamp if your speakers are capable of doing it, because you're going to get a much better sound quality, especially for stereo, if you were to use additional amplifiers. But obviously you don't get the additional 7.1, which is really useful obviously on Blu-ray and then for things like games as well. Speaker distance, this is fairly self-explanatory. They're in 15 centimetre increments, and this is the distance from your main listening position. And then this is the test level. So this is the test tone. You get some white noise come through the speaker, and then you want to try and equalise these all out so that especially the fronts are level with each other. You can do this obviously with the auto setup, but we tend to recommend that you tweak it personally, because ultimately your ear is far more suited to what you want to hear than a microphone is. On the equalizer settings, this is per location rather than per channel, so it's not front, left and right, it's just the front, 2 speakers, centre speaker, etc. And then obviously there's the THX audio setup, so whether you're using a THX sub is the loudness on or off. The audio adjust menu is various different settings for Dolby, DTS, and different sort of sound formats, and the LFE level. So you can make small adjustments to, obviously for example here, ProLogic 2X for music. Now, whether you use these or not, we tend to recommend, especially if you're listening to music, that you leave the amp in effectively like a direct or pure mode. You just have it stereo because that's what the artist intended. Obviously with the LFE level, you can set that dependent on the sound format that is being fed. So when the 809 recognises it's getting true HD, you can have it so the subwoofer is slightly lower or slightly higher. So there's a lot of different adjustments you can do per sound format on here. On the source setup, Odyssey's grayed out at the top. We'll be showing you that a little bit later. What IntelliVolume does is it tends to set the input level per individual source. So you can make sure that they're equalised. If you wanted to boost one of them, have one a little lower perhaps. And then the AV sync is for lip syncing. So you go right up to 800 milliseconds with this, and if you press enter on the remote control while you're doing it, you can see the picture at the same time, which is obviously really useful when you're trying to set up the lip sync. And there are some things that will have a syncing issue when they go through a receiver like this. It's not something that happens too much, but obviously you've got that function there if you do get it. Name editing changes the input name, so you could change obviously BD DVD to Onkyo if you had an Onkyo Blu-ray player, or cable sat to Sky, or game to Xbox, or something similar like that. And that changes the display on the unit itself. So when you're scrolling through, you can see the different names on the display. These are the picture adjust settings, which are really comprehensive on the 809, really quite impressive. What you'd expect to see on the television so things like the brightness and the contrast, but really more in depth, and there's very sort of noise reduction modes on there as well. As I said earlier, this unit is actually ISF video certified. It's really quite impressive. And then there's the audio selector as well. Moving further down, you've got the listening mode preset. So that outlines settings per source and then per audio format. So if you wanted to have it on pure audio, direct or stereo, you can force, depending on the sort of the sound format or depending on the source you're getting through. There's a few different settings, and there's also the Dsp modes in here. This Onkyo unit comes with four different Dsp modes specifically for games. So if you are a bit of a gamer, you can have 4 different Dsp modes for sports, rock, action or RPG. And obviously, as said, you can do that per input. Moving on to miscellaneous, the volume setup, firstly absolute or relative, so whether it's displayed in numbers or in dB. The muting level, so if you didn't want the muting level to be minus infinity, which is effectively just off, you can have it so it sets it to minus 40 or minus 50, so you can still hear it, but it's lower. Maximum volume, we wouldn't recommend that you go above 0 dB in general, but just in case you needed to for certain inputs, you've got something that's very quiet. And to stop someone overdriving your speakers, you can limit the maximum volume. Obviously, with any amplifier, you can blow up any speakers, but you can, as I say, you can limit the maximum volume with this particular unit. And then there's the OSD setup, which is just on and off, and the language. The hardware setup, so the first thing is the remote ID. So if you're using multiple Onkyo units, you can change the identification for the remote so that you don't tend to get as much interference. And then there's the zone 2 and 3 settings. So the maximum volume for the zones, the powering on volume. So similar things to what we had before, but a little bit more basic because they're out for the zone outputs. And then the HDMI settings. So if you're using the HDMI control, so that's when you can use the HDMI protocol to talk to other equipment. It's not always brilliant, so if you are having issues, then sometimes it's worth trying to turn that off, see if that makes a difference. And then whether the lip sync's on or the audio TV out. So if you sometimes just wanted the amp on standby, you can have the audio running through HDMI to your television. So if you didn't want to use your home cinema system, just the speakers on your TV, you can still feed everything through your Onkyo unit. There's auto standby on this as well, which you can turn on and off. And then obviously the network setup, and then a firmware update. So for this, you can update via the network or via the USB. It'll show you the firmware version. And you can also upgrade your universal port items, so the UPDT1 DAB module or the UPA1 iPod dock through the receiver. The remote control setup's a really interesting feature of the 809, but it must be connected to the network for you to be able to access this menu, otherwise it is greyed out. So what you can actually do with the 809's remote control is you can actually have it control basic functions of your other equipment. So it's really interesting because the remote itself, this database, normally they used to come in the back of instruction manuals, but in this actually has the database connected. You can connect through the network and it shows the database with the unit, and it can actually send the remote code back to the Onkyo 809 handset. What happens in this situation is the receiver button on the remote control will flash very rapidly when it's receiving a code, and then it gives you the opportunity to try the remote functions out. So there's a play and a pause button, for example. If it doesn't work, then you can try the next code along. Obviously with then and there we did that, but it's really quite interesting and quite impressive. Again, you can also do that with, say we're showing here with the satellite for Sky. So if you've got a Sky box, you can program the basic commands into the Onkyo remote, which so it limits the amount of, it's difficult having 3 or 4 remote controls, and you can just have the one. If for whatever reason it's not in the database, you can also teach the remote control. The Onkyo has a learning function, so if you point the remote control effectively at the Onkyo remote, you can teach it that way. It's a learning remote control. The activity setup here is effectively they're adjustable preset macros for your remote. So you have activity buttons and you just press one, and then obviously what we saw there, it will do each of those, and you can turn certain things on and off, which again is really quite good. So you could have one of them as listen to music, for example, and it will turn on your CD player and switch your amplifier over to the right input. And that was the home menu. So what you use the home menu for is sort of some very basic information and functions about the input you're on at the moment. We're just going to show you the Odyssey auto setup menu as well. So when you plug in the auto setup microphone, it takes you to this menu, and this is the Multi-Q XT auto setup from Odyssey. And again, you can set what type of speakers you are, and it just talks you through what you need to do. As I say, it's worth sort of doing the auto setups that come on AV receivers, and the Odyssey stuff is really good. But what we tend to recommend is that you do go in and tweak it manually afterwards. This is the USB storage. So if you were to play back some files from a USB stick, like a memory stick, this is what you'll see either on the screen or in the bottom corner here. You can actually see the front display of the unit as well. So you just scroll through by folder. Obviously, whatever you've named the folders on the stick is whatever's going to come up on the screen. But it also will display on the front panel the songs you listen to as well. With the Ipod Digital, first thing you'll need to do, it recognises an iPod is plugged in, and you need to press the mode button that's towards the bottom of the remote control to get into the extended mode. And again, it then looks very similar to the previous menu. So you scroll by folder or by album or by artist, and then after you press play, same thing. So the display will actually show you the name of the track and the name of the artist that you're listening to, and after a few seconds the album artwork does come up from the iPod as well. So that's quite a neat function that anyone who's got an iPod, if they wanted to put their music through your 809, they can come in and just plug it into the USB at the front. With the Vtune interface as well, this is the internet radio, it's Onkyo's Vtune interface, and this is really easy to use. You just go straight into, obviously we've gone into by location, by country we've gone to the BBC, and then you just go straight on. You can see it buffering. Again, this is all done on the front doable on the front panel as well. So if you don't want the TV on, you can still see what's happening. To set a unit up for sharing, so this is if you want to access stuff through the Dlna interface. So you saw there, the unit Windows will recognise the unit, but if for whatever reason that doesn't come up, or when you plug it in it doesn't recognise it, you can also go into here, go into the sharing menu, and make sure that that's allowed to be sharing. So you see there's the allow button's greyed out because we've already allowed it, but you can also customise those settings as well. When you're using Dlna interface, it's much like browsing music on your PC. So you go into the right folder, and then you can browse by genre, by artist, any way that it's organised, and then again it just brings up a list of folders, and you just pick the folder you want. So I think this time we're going for Arcade Fire, and again on the front display of the unit you can see you can also navigate that way. So you don't have to have the television on to do this. You can do it just by the front panel. So you can have the TV off and you have your network's music all playing through, and then everyone can see on the front panel what's playing. As I mentioned earlier, this unit does also have Spotify, and the Spotify interface we're just showing you here, so you can browse your playlists and see what's new. Unfortunately at the moment there isn't actually a search function, so you can't search through the rest of the Spotify content, but there will be an update for this most likely, so that you will be able to search, because it's a bit of an omission, but you still get to browse all your playlists, and you do have to have a Spotify Premium account to make this work. So if you've got Spotify Premium, you've probably already got quite a few playlists anyway, and as you say, you can just also go through your stuff that's been starred, obviously any playlist you've got, and then what's new as well. So at the moment obviously Lady Gaga is quite popular, so you browse what's new, but then the album artwork pops up. So if you've used Spotify before, you can see this, and obviously if it's Spotify Premium you get access to the much higher bit rates songs at 320 kilobits per second. The only thing about the Spotify interface I'd say is it can be a little bit slow to navigate, but once you're in there it's not too bad, and obviously you do get the album artwork, and again you get the use of the front panel. So what's in the box? Obviously you get the 809 amplifier, but along with that you get an instruction manual, obviously a power cable, there's the Odyssey setup microphone there, along with the AM and FM aerials below that, and then some batteries for your remote control. The remote control, as we've mentioned, is a fantastic piece of kit in its own right, and the fact that a learning remote comes with this unit is really quite amazing. On to the pros and cons then. So pros, the networking functionality of this unit is really quite impressive. Obviously you've got not only the ability to stream audio across your network, but you can also do things like listening to internet radio, and the Spotify capability, even though there's no search function at the moment, is really quite good. The build quality on this unit is fantastic. The aluminium front panel, the really crisp, clean lines around it, and even then internally you've got that huge power supply and the copper bus bars is really, really impressive. And then the remote control in its own right, as I said, is a great bit of kit. The fact that it's got a learning remote in with this unit is really quite impressive. Cons, well, there's no Apple AirPlay, which is a bit of a shame, but ultimately with the other streaming options you've got, so the Spotify, Vtune and the Dlna, and of course you've got Ipod Digital on this as well, I don't really think that the lack of Apple AirPlay at the moment is really much of an issue. Secondly, there's no GUI over the second HDMI output, so you don't get to see the setup menus over the second HDMI out, but ultimately you can just revert to the first one, and that's not too much of an issue. Really, I think these are really minor points against an otherwise absolutely fantastic unit, and I think it's something that if you're interested in an AV amp at this kind of price point, the 809 is definitely something you should be looking at going for. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video guide to the Onkyo TX-NR809 home cinema receiver. To see the rest of the Onkyo range, look at more information on this product, or to order it from us, then please do visit our website, www.avland.co.uk. Thanks very much.